if I want to do that. And so we find ourselves like Thomas, in a place of fear, in a place away from where Jesus is, and let me just kind of sit here in this place. 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 7. It's a familiar verse. It says, "For God gave us a spirit not of fear, but of power and love and self-control." And so when we find ourselves in these places, we have to remember that we have the power, the same power that he has. We have the same love that he has, and we have the same discipline or self-control that he has, and all of that is given to us. We don't have to earn it or get it. And so here you have Jesus. The Romans try to basically, let's destroy this whole movement about all these people believing these things and doing these things by killing Jesus. And then all of a sudden, Jesus shows up alive, which they weren't expecting. And the Romans had thought, you know what? This thing is finished and done. But now the fact that the tomb is empty changes everything. There's nothing the same now, because this man who said, I have the ultimate power and that power is against death, is actually proven it and defeated death. And so what does God do? He takes death and turns it into life. He takes the things that feel like death and turns them into life. That's what he does for us. And so we often think things are a bit too messy, too broken, too this, too that. We have all of our excuses or reasons why we don't trust that God's actually going to do it. But we have no reason to believe that if we look at him and who he is. Because this whole idea of death is a real deceitful thing. Because we get to the point where we think that life is really about what happens between now and this physical body dying. And so we do everything to protect that. It's risk management. It's how do I make sure that I get the most out of this life, and we forget that life goes well beyond the physical act of death. And we have to work our way past that lie, that if I'm going to be fruitful, I have to realize that, you know what, I have the power of God, and death is not the end for me. Now, that takes away a whole lot of boundaries and barriers for us at that point. So we can start to live now and not have this whole idea that self-preservation is my mission. I need to make sure that I do everything I can to protect myself, but that's not the case. And so when you find yourself friendless, you have to remember the tomb is empty. Like, everything changes. When you find yourself, things aren't so good at work. Well, wait, the tomb is empty. So that makes everything different. When you find yourself not getting into the school that you thought and hoped to be, you can realize, you know what? Hey, the tomb is empty. So none of that matters. I have that power in me. When I find myself lonely, when I find myself scared, when I find my bank account empty, when I find myself being misunderstood, if the tomb is empty, then anything can happen. And all of those things are they are situations that are hard and difficult, and some of them are tragic. But we have the power of God that takes death and turns it into life. If you look at that John passage, chapter 20, when Jesus showed up into that space with the disciples, the first word out of his mouth was peace. Peace be with you. And then we see him 8 days later showing up in a room with the disciples. Again, the first words out of his mouth, peace be with you. Like, that's what he does. He takes whatever crazy storm is going on around us and he turns it into peace. So we're gonna actually create a little storm here. So we're gonna start just kind of rubbing your hands together. You got kind of the light rain. Yeah, can you feel it? Can you hear it? Yeah. All right, start snapping those fingers. Starting to pick up a bit now. Yeah. Factions, the rain's starting to come. Now it starts to pass. A bit more. Okay, on the count of 3, we're going to do a loud hand clap and go back to patting our legs. Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3, clap back. 1, 2, 3, clap back. And this time we're going to go 1, 2, 3, clap and go silent. Ready? 1, 2, 3, clap. And that's the peace. Amidst the storms that we feel and everything is all, and God comes in and says, I can change all that. So what do you think of when you hear the word peace? What thoughts come to mind? What? Love? Uh-huh. Yeah.
Oh, I just think of, I don't know why, but I think of a piece of like bread or something.
Okay, piece of bread.
Right on.
Okay. What else do you think of when you think of peace? Deep breath. A deep breath.
Calm.
content,
Calm,
Quietness.
content, quiet, calm thoughts.
Serenity.
nature.
Uh-huh.
Sunrise.
Sunrise. Yeah, all of those things. We all have these pictures where we think of peace, like this is peace to me. And the Hebrew word peace is shalom, and it has the idea of completeness, and everything is as it should be. And all of those things, all are that. Like when you see the sunrise, the morning is cool and it's quiet and the sun is coming up, and you just get that feeling like everything is as it should be. And that's what God brings to the middle of stuff. So here, the disciples are stuck in this room, panic, what are we going to do? And the first words out of his mouth is, everything is as it should be. Just take a deep breath. And then that same power steps into our life and says, everything is as it should be. If I am the Lord your God, everything is as it should be. And that's what we have to remind ourselves. That's what Easter is about, is that there's this God who, in the worst of worst things, which is death on a cross by the Romans, like there's no painful or more terrible death than that. And God says, that's all right. I can take care of that. And he steps into our life and does the same exact thing. He says, whatever it is you have, whatever storm is going on, peace be with you. This life is not the end. And I want to step into that with you. So we're going to have a little time of communion. And communion is one of those things that Christ instituted just before his death to remind us of his death and the sacrifice that he made. And so if communion is something you don't want to partake in, and you think, I'm going to pass on that, that's fine. It's not something that you need to do. But for those of us who follow this idea of remembrance that Jesus laid out for us, it's just we take this little piece of bread, which is a reminder of us of the body